Hi, I'm Olivia, and today's happy nugget comes from Sir Winston Churchill, the greatest orator of the 20th century, not only moving the hearts and minds of millions of people, but also the might of nations. Winston Churchill was one of the greatest leaders the world has ever seen. British Prime Minister during World War II, he rallied his beleaguered nation and led them from the brink of defeat to victory. Before achieving the role of Prime Minister, for years, Churchill was the sole voice in his government, denouncing the Germans, pleading with the British Parliament to strengthen its defenses. In 1938, after the fall of Austria, Churchill rose to address Parliament, and he said, "For 5 years, I have talked to this House on these matters, not with very great success. I have watched this famous island descending incontinently, fecklessly, the stairway which leads to a dark gulf. Now is the time at last to rouse the nation. Perhaps it is the last time it can be roused, with a chance of preventing war, or with a chance of coming through to victory, should our efforts to prevent war fail. We should lay aside every hindrance and endeavor, by uniting the whole force and spirit of our people, to raise again a great British nation, standing up before all the world. For such a nation, rising in its ancient vigor, can even at this hour save civilization." In 1939, when Britain declared war after Germany's invasion of Poland, Churchill said, "We are fighting to save the world from a pestilence of Nazi tyranny, and in defense of all that is most sacred to man. This is no war for imperial aggrandizement or material gain. It is a war pure in its inherent quality, a war to establish on impregnable rocks the right of the individual. It is a war to establish and revive the stature of man." For someone who became the greatest and most notorious speaker in the world, Winston Churchill had to overcome many personal challenges. He was born with a congenital lisp and stammer in 1874 at Blenheim Palace, Oxfordshire, England. His ancestor was a famous British general and hero, the first Duke of Marlborough. His father was a prominent politician, one of the youngest chancellors of the Exchequer, which is the number 2 in the British government. But Winston Churchill had a lonely childhood, shipped from boarding school to boarding school, learning about the father he barely knew from reading about him in the newspapers. Churchill felt he was meant for a great destiny. In spite of his lisp and stammer, he determined early on that a command of the English language would be his path to greatness. He became his school's leading actor. Theater became an outlet for his frustrations, an avenue for his imagination, and an escape from his loneliness. He wrote newspaper columns, articles, and poetry, and was a fervent reader, memorizing countless plays and poems. He could recite on command, word for word, several Shakespeare plays, and would not hesitate to correct his teachers when they made a mistake. In Churchill's time, an aristocrat had 3 career choices: the church, the law, or the military. As a boy, Churchill had a collection of 1,500 toy soldiers he assembled into great battalions and orchestrated great wars. Winston Churchill chose to be a soldier and worked very hard to apply himself at the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. His father's political star had faded as quickly as it rose, and at 18, Churchill sensed that he would soon have to make it on his own, and that failing in the army would spell the end of his dreams and his destiny. He did extremely well, eventually becoming a national hero after making a dramatic escape from a prison in South Africa. But Churchill had political aspirations, and a career in the military did not lend itself to politics. He felt there were gigantic gaps in his knowledge, wide spaces of ignorance that needed to be filled. He spent years at his military post in India studying. From a fantastic biography by James C. Hume of Churchill, he writes, "The only answer was for Churchill to educate himself. He would set up what F. Scott Fitzgerald would later call a University of One. He would use the 3 or 4 hours in the torrid midday when his fellow officers played cards, to read what he would have studied at Oxford or Cambridge. Of all the efforts in Churchill's life, this achievement of self-education was the most formidable. He had no teacher, no guide, no intellectual soulmate to bounce ideas off of or share thoughts. He would teach, discipline, and grade himself. He read, as the hungry eat, neither from habit nor from duty, but from need. These books entered his system and became part of him. After India, Churchill prepared for his first political speech. His lisp and stammer could not be corrected by an operation, but could only be modified through constant practice and perseverance. Churchill worked tirelessly to mask his stammer in the rhythm of his delivery, and to lessen the effect of his lisp by accentuating certain sounds while minimizing the ones he couldn't pronounce. The result was a magnificent and powerful delivery of words, written with blood, sweat, and tears, to move the hearts and minds of people and to shape the course of history. Sir Winston Churchill was a champion of justice, fighting against the forces of evil who wished to extinguish the light of freedom in the free world. He never stopped, he never gave up, and he triumphed, ushering an era of peace to Europe and the world. But he warned that the enemy of freedom is always there, and we should never let our guard down. Nothing came easy to Winston Churchill, least of all speaking. To excel, he had to develop an intense power of concentration and overcome his greatest limitations. We all have a destiny and a purpose, and to fulfill it, we have to overcome our limitations, including our ignorance. We have to become our own university, absorbing the knowledge that will lead us to reach our deepest goals. And that's today's Happy Nugget. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it, and subscribe. As always, I link below the video anything I recommend. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. See you next time.